The first thing I heard that morning was screaming. It was 7:12 a.m. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee. The sound was coming from downstairs. My father's voice. My sister's voice. It was a sound I'd never heard before. Panic. Not anger. Panic. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. My father, Richard, was pacing the marble floor of the foyer. His face was red. My sister, Sienna, was sitting on the stairs, her head in her hands. Then my father looked up at me. His eyes were wide. "Naomi," he said, "where is the money? Where is the $4.2 million? I took a slow sip of my coffee. I looked at him. I could see the fear in his eyes. That's when I knew for sure. My father, the great Richard Carter, had never expected me to fight back. I walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time. I stopped when I was just a few feet away. "Yes," I said. "I transferred it." He stepped forward, shaking. "You stole from me." I shook my head. I felt calm, and that calm scared him more than anything I could have said. "No, Dad," I said. "I protected it. From you." The screaming started again, but it was already too late. My name is Naomi Carter. I am 32 years old. For the last 10 years, I have been the person who kept my father's company alive. Carter Development. It's a successful construction and property business. My grandfather, Henry, started it 50 years ago. He built it from nothing. But if you asked anyone in town who is the future of Carter Development, they would say Sienna. My younger sister by 3 years. Sienna is the golden child. She has my father's confidence. His charm. She walks into a room and people look at her. She is beautiful. She smiles. She wears the right clothes. I am the quiet one. I work in the back office. I do the paperwork. I handle the contracts. I pay the vendors. I make sure the taxes are correct. I deal with compliance. I structure the deals so the company doesn't fail. I am good at making things invisible. My father once said to me, in front of his partners, "Naomi is great with paperwork. She's not a leader, but she's useful." He said it like it was a compliment. I was 28. That was the story of my life. Sienna's path was always paved for her. My father paid for her to go to a great university. She studied fashion. She spent a year abroad. When she graduated, my father gave her a manager title. She never had to prove anything. At company events, my father would introduce her as the future of Carter Development. He would say, "She has the vision." I was never introduced as the future. I was the one who fixed the problems. One time, a project was about to go under. We were at risk of being sued for breach of contract. I worked 3 weeks straight, fixing the cash flow. I saved us $3 million. My father didn't praise me in public. He just said, "Good catch, Naomi. Good catch." That was the phrase my father used when he wanted to tell me I was valuable enough to keep around, but not valuable enough to inherit. It was a Friday night. A formal dinner at my father's house. I remember everything about that night. The house smelled like expensive roses. The table was set with 6 plates. Fine china. The crystal glasses sparkled. It was a celebration. Sienna had been given a new title. She was going to be an executive vice president. My mother, Evelyn, was there. She was in a beautiful blue dress. She looked happy, proud. Sienna was laughing. My father was smiling. I was asked to prepare the financial transition documents. "Just the boring stuff," Sienna joked. "That's why I have you, sis." We all laughed. I laughed, too. The dinner was long. My father gave a toast to Sienna. "To my daughter," he said. "The future of this family." He looked at me. He added, "And to Naomi for keeping things organized." I smiled. I drank my wine. I nodded. Later that evening, I was looking for a book in my father's office. I needed to find a file. I walked down the hallway to his study. The door was slightly open. I heard Sienna's voice. "Dad," she was saying, "what is Naomi getting?" I stopped walking. My heart started beating faster. I shouldn't have stayed, but I did. Then I heard my father. "You'll get everything," he said. "She won't." It was simple, direct. "She doesn't have the personality for it," he continued. "She's just not a leader. But you, Sienna, you're going to be amazing." I felt cold. I wasn't sad. I was just cold. A heavy realization. I walked back to my room. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I just sat there. I realized something important. I had spent 32 years trying to make him see me, and he had just admitted he never would. A few days after the dinner, I was still reviewing the documents for Sienna's transition. I was at my desk. It was late. I found a draft, a corporate restructuring plan. It was hidden in a file that wasn't supposed to be part of the official records. I read it carefully. My father was planning to place Sienna in control of the main company, but there was a catch. He was planning to create a new subsidiary. He was going to move several risky company liabilities into that subsidiary. And guess who was listed as the manager of the subsidiary? Naomi Carter. I read it twice. He was positioning me to be responsible for the company's debt, for the legal risks, for everything that could go wrong. Sienna would have the assets. She would have the power. I would have the legal liability. I put my head in my hands. I felt sick. It wasn't just that he loved her more. He was willing to ruin me to make her successful. That was the moment I stopped being his daughter. I stopped being loyal. I became something else. Scene 5. The hidden money. That night, I started investigating. I had access to everything. I was the chief financial officer. I knew the codes. I knew the passwords. I started digging. And what I found was worse than I expected. There was hidden debt. Massive debt. My father had been borrowing heavily against future projects. He was using bank loans to pay for the family's lifestyle. The Mercedes. The vacations. The expensive dinners. The private school for Sienna's kids. The company was beautiful, but it was a shell. Then I found the protected reserve account. It was separate from the main operating account. It held $4.2 million. It was a special fund that had been set up years ago by my grandfather, Henry. My father had signed documents during a financial crisis. He had given me emergency authorization to control that account. He didn't remember. He probably didn't even think it was important. I stared at the account on my screen. I knew I had the power to move that money. Legally, the next morning, I went to see Margaret Wells. Margaret is the family attorney. She is 60 years old. She is wise. She had been the company's lawyer since my grandfather's time. I told her what I had found. Naomi, she said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I don't know what else to do," I said. "They are going to destroy the company, and they are going to leave me to take the blame." Margaret was silent for a moment. "Before you do anything," she said, "you should know something." "What?" "Your grandfather didn't trust your father," she said. "He had me prepare a succession file years ago. It's sealed. It can only be opened if the company is at risk." I felt a shiver. "What's in it?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know all the details. But I know Henry had a vision. He didn't want the company to fail. And he didn't want you to be destroyed." Scene 7. The legal transfer. I went home that night. I sat in my living room. I thought about my father, his dismissal of me. I thought about Sienna, her comfort in the sacrifice. I thought about the $4.2 million. It wasn't my father's personal money. It was a corporate reserve. It was meant to protect the business. It wasn't meant to be used for Sienna's inheritance. I made a decision. The next day at 5:30 p.m., I logged into the company's financial system. I verified the legal transfer documents. The clause my grandfather had inserted years ago. The clause my father had signed. It all checked out. I entered the numbers. I sent the transfer. $4.2 million moved from the main operating account. It wasn't stolen. It was protected. It was transferred into a protected escrow and restructuring trust. I was the designated manager. It was legal, perfectly legal. I closed my laptop. I had a cup of tea. I went to bed. That brings me back to the foyer. My father was screaming. He was pacing. He was shouting accusations. He was speaking to the bank on the phone. "It's gone," he yelled into the receiver. "My own daughter. She stole it." I stood by the stairs. I looked at him. "Sit down, Dad," I said. He looked at me like I was a stranger. "You're a thief," he said. "No," I said. "I'm a CFO." I walked to the table. I opened my laptop. I showed him the documents. "The money isn't a trust," I said. "It's a protected reserve account. You signed documents giving me the authority to protect it. You've been lying about the company's finances." Sienna stood up. "You're lying," she said. "Dad would never do that." I looked at her. You knew, I said. You knew about the restructuring. You knew about the liabilities. She didn't answer. Her silence was my answer point. 3 hours later, my mother, Evelyn, came into the room. She was crying. Naomi, she said. I'm sorry. For what, Mom? I knew, she said. I found your grandfather's succession file months ago. I knew your father was making a mistake. She looked at Richard. I told you to be careful, she said. I told you to treat her right. My father's face went pale. What file? He asked. My mother walked to her bag. She took out an envelope. It was marked with my grandfather's handwriting. We opened the envelope. It contained a letter. I sat down and read it aloud. It was a letter from my grandfather, Henry Carter. In it, he explained that Richard never fully owned the company. He had inherited management responsibility, but the actual ownership was held in a family trust. And Richard had conditions. If he ever tried to exclude a legitimate family beneficiary, if he ever tried to transfer the company to an unqualified successor, if he ever attempted to burden one heir with debt while granting another the assets, then Richard's voting rights would be suspended, and the protected reserve, that $4.2 million, would be placed under the control of the person who represented the financial integrity of the company. That person was me, the one who had sacrificed. The letter ended. Naomi, I watched you grow. I saw how hard you worked. Your father doesn't see you, but the company does. The records do. You have always been my successor. I never said it while I was alive. I was afraid of the conflict, but now you need to know the truth. The company is yours, not because you took it, but because you earned it. I finished reading. The room was silent. Richard's face was broken. He looked old. His entire life's control had just been erased by a piece of paper. Sienna stared at the floor. She had nothing to say. Her inheritance was a fantasy. A week later, we had an emergency board meeting. Margaret was there. The accountants were there. The key business partners were there. Richard walked in with Sienna. He was trying to look confident. He pretended he was still in charge. But everyone knew. Margaret placed Henry's succession documents on the table. She laid out the hidden debt, the misuse of company resources, the attempted transfer of liabilities. The board members read the evidence. They learned that my father's extravagant lifestyle was built on borrowed money, that his promise to Sienna was hollow. The final vote was taken. Richard's operational control was suspended. Sienna's promotion was void. The company would be managed by an independent restructuring committee, and I was named the financial custodian. Richard and Sienna didn't end up in prison. The law is not a movie, but they lost everything that mattered to them. Control, respect, the illusion of wealth. Without the company to fund his lifestyle, Richard had to sell the house. He had to sell the cars. He had to let go of the image he had spent a lifetime building. Sienna's social standing fell apart. She had built her life around being the future of an empire. The empire was gone. She had to get a real job. A job she wasn't qualified for. She would face her first failure. The board offered me the CEO position. I considered it. I had worked for this my whole life. But I realized something. I didn't want to be the replacement. I didn't want to be the one who did all the work for people who never appreciated it. I wanted to be free. I will lead the restructuring, I told the board. I will stabilize the business. I will preserve my grandfather's legacy. But I will not be like my father. I took a position on the board. I focused on rebuilding. I kept the employees. I paid the creditors. I stabilized the future of Carter Development. Richard asked to meet me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. We met at a small coffee shop. The first time we met without business involved. He was diminished. He looked tired. I was wrong, Naomi, he said. I wanted you to be soft. I wanted you to be happy with nothing. I was wrong. He was expecting forgiveness. He thought I would be moved by his admission. I looked at him. Dad, I said, you spent my entire life making me believe that being useful was the same as being loved. I don't need either from you anymore. I stood up. I put a $10 bill on the table. I walked away. That was the last time I spoke to my father alone. I am Naomi Carter. I am 33 now. The company is stable. The money I transferred that night was used to protect the employees, the projects, and the people who actually needed the company to survive. My father lives in a small apartment. He is comfortable, But he is no longer special. He is just a retired man with no real control. Sienna is learning to be normal. It's hard for her, but she is learning. I don't hate them. I just don't care anymore. That is the most powerful feeling in the world. I built a life that doesn't depend on their approval. I don't need them to love me. I don't need them to see me. I see myself. That is the gift I gave myself. The one they could never steal. The next week, I found a file in the accountant's office. It wasn't about the money. It was about the house. The house my father was using as collateral for secret loans. And I knew then that the money wasn't the problem. It was the evidence. And I had it. Months later, the company has a new office. New leadership. New energy. I walk into my office each morning. The windows are bright. The people I work with respect me. I don't need a title to feel powerful. I don't need an inheritance to feel worthy. My father taught me a lesson. He taught me that I could never be enough for him. But he also taught me that I didn't need to be. My grandfather saw me. And that matters more than a check or a trust fund. The truth is simple. I didn't steal that money. I didn't destroy my family. I just stopped allowing myself to be sacrificed for them. And that, I realized, is the most important thing a person can do. The people who dismiss your contributions are often the ones who need them the most. You don't owe them your silence. You only owe yourself your freedom.